miracle at UGP. Are you ready for a miracle with UGP? Oh, radio is here for you. We're gonna learn something new. Oh, are you ready for a miracle at UGP?
Jesus went onto the well and made the water wine. Raised Lazarus from the dead, restored sight to the blind. Jesus said, "Look at the sea." He walked across the sea. He said, "Greater than this, you shall do." We gave power to you and me. I want to know.
Are you ready for a miracle?
I want to know.
Are you ready for a miracle?
For you and me.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Ready. Woo. Are you ready for a miracle with you and me?
Jesus taught the lame to walk, destroyed the devil's plan. Healed the leper, fed 5,000 with just one command. He said, "He who has ears, let them hear." He told the multitude, "And blessed be the pure of heart, for they shall see the truth." I want to know.
Are you ready for a miracle?
I want to know.
Miracle.
Ooh, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you
Blessed be the ones who mourn, for they shall find their peace. Blessed be the ones who search, blessed be the meek. Blessed be the innocent, for they shall all be free. Blessed be the miracle, the made for you and me.
Are you ready for a miracle? Yeah. Are you ready for a miracle? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you
Are you ready for a miracle? It is I, your underground professor, coming at you almost live high atop a Hermitage of North Texas's liberal conservative studies. And I am gaily arching my feet, swinging them over the arch of a double rainbow. We are on for the big clock 2 hours today. We're going to need it all because there's too much to talk about. This is Football Sunday. I know that a lot of you are still watching the football games, especially if you're a Cowboy fan. Oh, boy. So I got through the first half. You can talk about the first half. That's fine. I got to the half, then I had to turn it off. It's being recorded. And sadly, I did not turn off my news crawler, and so it popped up and told me that Romo has been knocked out of the game with a vicious hit. So I know that much anyway. I have never seen such bad football in one half. What was that? 4 delay of games, 4 offsides or false starts rather. And I don't know if it was just both teams or just the refs are going crazy throwing flags, but it looked like almost all of them were there. Only 1 or 2 I may have not thrown a penalty flag for or agree with the refs. But what the heck? It's the way the game is. It's what the game is. And it's incredible to have that many first downs in one half and not have but 6 points. And I just, I've been thinking about this. The first game was last week, right? And I was watching. I was like, you can't go to 2 seconds left on the game clock every down. For one thing, the bad guys start figuring this out, right? They start figuring out you got to hike your ball now, 1 or 2, so they can start anticipate coming. And if you do this every stinking play, then it becomes something that can be exploited. And so, anyway, this time, though, they didn't have the magic of pulling it off every single time. Patriots did win. The Bills couldn't pull it off. Let me see here. Where is my Twitter at? Got to find Twitter. Hold the phone. So I just saw a Twitter message, and I don't have it up. I wonder what happened to it. Let me click here and bring up my Twitter feed. There I am. So, now if I can just get to go to me. There we go. You didn't even holler on air during the EDL show. I noticed that. I was listening to the beginning of it just a little bit ago. You were very calm and collected, so kudos to the Unpleasant Blind Guy. All right, speaking of the Unpleasant Blind Guy, here it is. I'm brain dead, guys. I am so freaking tired. I still haven't really bounced back from that poison ivy medicine debacle from Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever that was. Wednesday, I guess. All right, we're going to do some Cato letters. And then the last, let me see here. What time is it? It is 6:07 my time. About 7:15, I'm going to play a soundbite from my friend Agadorable. And Agadorable has sent us a soundbite for the next 4 Sundays, I think, 3 or 4 Sundays. 3 Sundays. And we're going to spend the last, on Sunday at 15 after the second hour, I will play it. And then for the last half hour, he and I will talk about it. Hey, Boyd, welcome. Boyd's in the chat room. We've got some callers, some people on Periscope. Welcome, everybody in Periscope. And so I think that explains that. And that's what we'll do. And it's called The Way Back, okay? And I think you're going to really enjoy it. Now, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but it's a policy on my show. It's my policy as a commentator that you don't just sit and bitch about things. There's plenty of radio show hosts out there that can tell you what's wrong with everything, and then they do. Got it. Charlie Ho. So, there's plenty of those. And then there's those who want to get other people on to tell you how everything should be done to fix it. And then they blame them when it does or doesn't work, etc. My policy has always been that I not only identify problems, but I identify solutions, or at least ones that I think would work and things that I have thought about and researched. And so I hope that cuts me out a little bit above some of the others. Not above, that's the wrong word, but it separates me, distinguishes me from some of the other hosts out there that do these things. Well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about a post-constitutional America where we are rapidly approaching a dystopian state, if you will, and what to do in the meantime to prepare for that. Now, this isn't going to be a prepper show, okay? We're not talking about that. We're talking about being freedom preppers, liberty preppers, not preppers for buying food in bulk and building underground bunkers and arming yourself. And if you want to do that, I'm not making fun of you. I see the appeal. Trust me, I would like to go up and buy about 3,000 acres in Montana, put 50 millimeter machine guns on automatic firing turrets and targeting systems on every corner, and just let it rip anything that's bigger than a rabbit, and it's gone. And I think that would be the best way to have great neighbors. And the more people I know, the less I'm liking them, the less Christian I'm able to be. especially like when I ride my motorcycle. I just cannot believe how imbecilic people can be out there. It's dumb enough to be on a motorcycle, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's an incredible joy. It's very liberating. And if I have to say it, macho. It's a little man. But there are so many retards out there that think they can drive. So many people on their phones and doing things. It just never ceases to amaze me how bad they are at driving. Boy, my beard is just not sitting where it's been all pumped up in my helmet all day, and now it's weird looking. They're bad drivers if they were only driving. Right? Most people are bad drivers if all they were doing was actually paying attention to their driving, but most don't pay attention to the driving because they're distracted, singing, eating, applying makeup, calling, talking, texting, everything but eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. I am scared to death of driving with my son-in-law. That I prefer sitting in the back seat and I read because he has this amazing, and he's a good driver. I'm not saying he's not a good driver, trust me, but I don't like people without two hands on the steering wheel. Unless it's something very temporary, like you're scratching your nose or something, and your hand goes back. But this man could drive 20,000 miles without stopping and never apply more than about two fingers to the steering wheel, and it's frightening. And he goes in these back roads, the speed limit, is like 70 miles an hour up in Michigan on these little roads that barely two cars can pass each other. And in Texas, we wouldn't have a speed limit above 30 on it. It'd probably be even less. So it's a matter of what you're used to and stuff. But I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to get nervous about people and their driving because I see wrecks everywhere constantly, and I imagine you do too. And so I curse them and I caution you. What? Think I'm going too far? What do you think? You want to add something? Huh? Want to add something? Okay. I thought you were all talk. To pay attention, to be aware of what's going on, and to watch out for other people. Because you think you're in a hurry. Wait until you clip a motorcycle or you hit another car, and your day is done. You're not going to be in a hurry for the rest of the day because of all the investigation and insurance and extra cost and driver courses, and it's not worth it. And if you stop and ever think about it, it's like you save seconds at best when you do the crazy shortcuts that are dangerous, that you risk your life, and that's one thing. But when you risk other people's lives and other people's property, all to save 2 or 3 seconds of your life, it's because you're in such a hurry. I can promise you most of us are not that important, and unless you're on your way to go and do life-saving surgery, then you can probably be, you can probably pay attention to what you're doing and take your time. And yes, that's the thing, Boyd says too bad cars are designed to save the people who are idiots driving them. Yes, well, you see, that's exactly what they are. And the government started all that because they needed to protect people from themselves because government wanted to intrude into our vehicles and stuff. Back when we didn't have seat belts, people didn't drive as crazy because you didn't want to go through a windshield. And it's just like in football. When we didn't have helmets, we had fewer head injuries than when we added leather helmets. And then we had fewer after comparison to adding the padded ones. And then the ones of today, the more specialized equipment you put a football player in, the more risks they're willing to take. And if you just put them out there in a pair of gym shorts and some sneakers, you'd have far less injuries. And it may sound counterintuitive, but it's the same with driving. It's the same with things. We put in a car, and we strap this car around us like a suit of armor, and we act as if we're the only ones on the road that matter and that we're impervious to danger. And the younger you are, the more likely you are to think that you're going to live forever and that your reflexes, your instincts, your knowledge will get you out of everything. The luxury of being old like me is learning that That's not true. And while I'm aware that my instincts and reactions are now slowing down, I'm relying on my vast knowledge of millions of miles of driving all around the world in all kinds of vehicles on both sides of the car, etc., to get me out of trouble. And I just cannot tell you. I hardly ever honk my horn in a vehicle. Hardly ever. I might honk my horn 2-3 times a year, right? Because it doesn't do much good. It pisses off the idiot you're honking at because you've just now alerted everyone else around that he's an idiot. And they don't like that. Idiots, for some reason, especially idiots, do not like being notified as being idiots. When I do something stupid, I usually stick my hand up in the air and to acknowledge, hey, sorry, it was me. I apologize. I wave to let them know I had just done something stupid. I cop to it. But idiots don't like that. Now, on my motorcycle, I bet you I honk my horn 10 times every ride. Just going 12 miles to church and back, each way, 12 miles. And I'll honk it 2 or 3 times in each direction. And it just saddens me because there's that many people, and they'll like whiz around me, get in front, and then slow down because they don't want to be behind a motorcycle, but they don't mind going 20 miles over the speed limit to get in front of me, to squeeze into that spot that I've got because I've got extra distance between me and the idiot in front of me. And then they want to whiz in, fill that spot up, and then drive erratically because they're busy getting on their phone and doing things. And it's just mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. I heard a comedian back in the 80s that suggested that we each get a special gun issued to us. And this gun shoots suctioned darts at vehicles. And it's specially made so that you shoot a car with it and it sticks to it. And it has a little flag flying off of it that says idiot. Whenever a cop is going down the road and it sees a car and it has 2 or 3 of these sticking on it, that it immediately pulls the guy over and just gives him a ticket for being an idiot and get him off the street. And I kind of like that idea. There's some merit to that. There's some merit to that. Can you guys not hear me? Oh, I need louder pipes. Yeah, I know. I drive a hog and people hear it, but then they come around me and then they act like, where were you? Yeah. The same people who just went around me and they're all pointing at the Santa Claus looking guy driving down the highway with his beard flapping everywhere. And so I told you guys about that story not too long ago where I was driving perpendicular to the road, sliding with forward momentum because the SUV, the big, huge Suburban next to me, both the driver and the passenger were on their phones communicating with others, or maybe with each other. I'm not sure, but it could have been with each other. And so neither were paying attention to the driving. And then their little GPS unit on their dash told them to make a right turn, and so they did, whether they were in the middle lane or the turn lane, where I was in the right-hand lane. And they almost killed me. If they'd have hit me, I don't think I would have survived that. And they both acted shocked, even though I was sitting right there beside them and had looked into their vehicle and they had looked at me. And then 10 seconds later, they did this inanely stupid act of moronicy and then acted surprised to find me there. So I don't know. You can't fix stupid, right? Can't fix stupid. So enough of that. That's not what this show's about. Cato's Letters. Cato's Letters. Now, we've been doing a series on the B team of framers and founders and stuff, right? And one of the things that I'm big on is the concept of freedom and liberty. Okay? Now, Cato was often used as a pseudonym by people back in the revolutionary periods. And yeah, exactly. I need like a Terminator, plasma rifle or something on my back as I'm driving down, maybe people would leave me alone. And little do they know I am armed, Boyd. I've usually got a 9mm every time I'm on my motorcycle. So, and it's great civil restriction. So the founding fathers hid who they were by using pseudonyms. They did this for many reasons, of course. Some of the reasons were they didn't want the British to figure out who they were, so they couldn't come and get them. This gave an air of plausible deniability. Of course I'm not Cato. Of course I'm not this or that or the other. And so, like John Dickinson, a letter from a Pennsylvania farmer, me? Really? So this kept their heads out of nooses so they wouldn't get hung by the court, by the crown. But it also had other aspects to it. For instance, sometimes they wanted to write, but they didn't want people to read the writing and base their opinion on the writing on the author and his reputation. So, someone like William Smith, he was a physician in Philly and a preacher, of course. And he was one of the ones to use Cato as a pseudonym, especially in the New York Journal and Pennsylvania Gazette or something like that. I can't remember now, a long time ago. But anyway, in 87 and 1788, he was opposed to James Madison, who was urging ratification of the Constitution. So Reverend Dr. William Smith used Cato as a pseudonym to argue against them. And Cato is often quoted in the anti-federalist side of this, okay? And so you have that aspect of Cato and that aspect of pseudonyms and whatnot. Now, but they weren't the first or the most important. There was, I think, a 2-volume set, 4-volume set. 2 volume, 4? Oh, well, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? It's just several books were printed of letters that were published by a couple of journalists. Now, before Jefferson was even born, Thomas Jefferson, Richard Henry Lee, George Washington, etc., there were 2 Englishmen. We were all Englishmen back then, right? Especially before Jefferson was born. We were Englishmen. And there were 2 journalists that were writing articles for a newspaper, and they were advancing something very radical for its time. And that is the principle of liberty and freedom. The idea of self-rule, the idea that we had in, well, there's a lot of things that we'll get into in it, but to know that these guys wanted to talk about liberties and freedoms, both civil, religious, personal. And so they started writing a collection of letters that were published in the newspapers, etc., in the British Journal later. But it was the London Journal originally, and that was like in the 1720s, and then it became 144 essays, I think, they published, and then that was published in the London Journal later, the British Journal, and then it later became a book series collected on Cato's letters. Now, if you know who Clinton Rossiter is, he calls it the most popular, quotable, esteemed source of political ideas in the colonial period. Now, I told you about the letters from Pennsylvania Farmer that Dickinson wrote and being the most read, etc. at the time. Well, when our founding fathers started studying to think about, did they have a right to rebel? Do they have any legal recourse? Do they have authority from God? Do they have authority from natural law, etc., and stuff? This was one of their major sources, okay? 144 essays was not exhaustive, but it was not a cursory look either, okay? And so it got published into I think, an edition where there was two volume sets. If I think maybe it was boiled down to 2 volumes. But in 1755, I think that's what it was. It was 4 volume set, and then it got further reduced to a 2 volume set by 1755. And now 1755 picks up, and we have all the stuff happening with all the acts from Parliament, and these men, Washington, Jefferson, Henry, etc., et al., are now involved politically, and they're getting their feet wet, and they're starting to protest and push back against the crown, back against government. Okay? And so, and I think even to this day, Liberty Fund owns the copyrights to all that. And so I want to make sure I dig that out in case. And so there were just a crap load of these things. Okay? Now, oh, goodness. Now I'm forgetting John Trenchard, okay, and Thomas, not Artemis Gordon, Thomas Gordon. Okay, Artemis Gordon was from Wild Wild West. Thomas Gordon and John Trenchard. Got to do my mnemonics. Trenchcoat, Trenchard, Gordon, Artemis, Thomas. There we go. So Thomas Gordon and John Trenchard were the 2 journalists in England that were writing Cato's letters. Now, Cato's letters, like most books and stuff, has another name, a subname. And it's called Cato's Letters, or Essays on Liberty, Civil and Religious and Other Important Subjects, by John Trenchard and Thomas Gordon. Now, I like that. Where did I stick it? Okay, got that, and there we go. So, Cato. Well, Cato was kind of an important guy, right? I'm trying to find my keynote on this, and now I can't find it. I'm just drawing a brain dead blank here. Let me see here. There we go. Cato is a word that we think of today as wise, right? Wisdom, and that honor, I think you could say. Now, there is a very famous 18th century play, which was Cato, a Tragedy. And I think it was done in 1718 or something like that, when they started popping out that. I'll have to think about that. Maybe it'll pop into my head. Cato the Elder was known as the censor, from Marcus Porcius Cato, about 234 BC to 1. I got it up here. I know I do. 149 BC. Yes. So all this is before Christ. Okay. And he stood up against government, if you will, against tyranny. And so that is why the anti-federalists, who were claiming that the new constitution coming in would be tyrannical and would create tyrants on our shore instead of having them 2,000 miles away, chose Cato as a representative of that, for the anti-federalists. And George Clinton also used Cato, if I'm not mistaken, as a pseudonym. And so that I can throw Agador a bone, Cato Fong, F-O-N-G, was also Inspector Clouseau's manservant in the Pink Panther movies, and always kept him sharp with the karate. And so yes. And not finding the word I want here, but okay. He was thought to be, well, he wasn't thought to be, he was called a patrician, all right? And he was a senior senator, a senior statesman for Rome. And they called him Cato the Censor, because he had censor duties. Oh, yes, that's right, Ag. Cato also from the Green Hornet period. And they called him Cato the Ancient, Cato the Elder. The guy was freaking old back then, especially old, very old. And he was 85 or so. You know, a lot of guys made that back then when he passed on. And he was conservative for his time. He did not like Hellenization occurring in Rome. And he is credited, I don't know if it's true, but he's credited with having been the first to start writing histories in Latin, which then all the founders started studying, right? They ate that stuff up, okay? He was from a plebeian family. He was in the military. Their families were not civilian leaders. They were military leaders. They were agriculturalists. You know, they liked farming. That's what his fame is there. And he was brought to Rome to follow the cursus honorum and became a military tribune. All right, and he went through that whole period of growth and stuff. In 214, he was a tribune. In 204, he became a quaestor and aedile in 199, and a praetor in 198. Junior consul. A praetor is a pretty good job to have, by the way. He became the junior consul in 195 with Flaccus, and then he became the censor in 184, which is after you've been a consul. Then the censor is the one that kind of sits out and reviews and vetoes, determines, I guess is a way of saying that. So when he was the praetor, in Sardinia, he got rid of the usurers and the people that were, well, usurers, as the definition means, with money and whatnot. And he also tried to preserve Rome's customs. Now, Rome was dying already, and they were losing their touch and their customs. They're what founded them, what made them great as a country, okay? And I suggest to you that we're there right now in America. That's our stage, where people say Nero's fiddling and we have, we're living in a post-constitutional America. Well, not necessarily, but I can see sometimes arguments being made, I guess, I can get where they're coming from. But the idea here is this, is that we have lost our traditions, we have destroyed our own myths, and we no longer look to the past for guidance on how to move forward and be great. We've rejected our past, and this is what he was fighting against, those rejections of the past, the new degenerate Hellenistic influences and tendencies. And he then became known as Cato the Elder, because he had a great-grandson who was named Cato after him and was opposed to Julius Caesar. And so they named him Cato the Elder. All right. And so let me see if I can find what I want to do here. There's something here that I wanted to say about him. And now, Cato was a historian, and he did a lot of writing in Latin. And he did a lot of history on Italy and Latin and whatnot. And he wrote a book called De Agricultura, which means on agriculture. And now, our founding fathers ate that crap up because they wanted to be gentlemen farmers, right? And that was something that was big over in America, was to be a farmer. Now, in Britain, they looked down on people who called themselves farmers. But in America, it was a good way to riches, and it was honorable, and they were at the high end of the pecking order. Look at all the farmers that were involved in the fight for liberty. And when you include farmers, you have to include people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Sometimes they were referred to as planters. So Cato wrote his book, De Agricultura, and that was well read over here. Origins is his first book, most important work, his magnus opus, and it was 7 books that he wrote on the origins of humans, on Rome, what it means to be a Roman. What else was that about? I can't remember now. But that's sadly lost. So we only have guesses on it and fragments to look at. He wrote a ton of his speeches out. He had done some of 150, 200 speeches he gave, and they were written out in text and stuff for people to study and figure out what was going on. And the ideas were like he would talk about whether elections were fair or appropriate, or what was the right level of government to use, and did they have the authority to do these things. And so I guess you can say that's about that. Now, where did I put it? There we go. Now, his great-grandson stood up against Caesar. Now, he was from 95 to 46 BC. He didn't live too long. We called him Cato Minor, or Cato the Younger. And he was a politician too, a statesman in the Roman Republic, of course. He was Stoic, okay? As philosophy went, he followed the Stoic line, and was well known for his orations. As a talker, he was well known for being a great orator. And he had, some would call a lengthy war or fight with conflict with Julius Caesar. I don't think it was that long, but it was mostly over his perceived distaste of corruption and whatnot, of government intrusion and government corruption, and people enabling each other and reward each other, and like today, where we have so many of the people in both political parties and leadership making sure each other has money and power and prestige and support and defense. And so the rest of us are kind of screwed at this. Now, I said Stoicism. Cato the Elder was against Hellenistic transformations and reformations. But Stoicism is, in fact, a Hellenistic philosophy. One of the ones I think I kind of understand the most. And so Cato Younger, Cato Minor, was part of the school of Stoicism. It was founded in Athens by Zeno of Citium, 3rd century. And the concept here is that if you want to make judgment, if you want to think, if you want to use logic and whatnot, emotion will screw that up. Okay? We today sort of are around that, aren't we? When we say things like being a progressive is emotional, has nothing to do with logic and facts, and that a conservative, that's what it's all about. Well, that's basically was the same argument the Stoics were saying. All right, and they believed in the 7 virtues, one of them being phoraises. I can't really pronounce that word. Prohairesis, which is a virtue to maintain your will, not to lose control of your emotions, your thinking. You're not to go crazy and go not blitzkrieg. What's the word? I want to be the German word, but berserk. Okay, Rome was attacked often by berserkers, the Germanic tribes, and that blew their mind, because this is the complete opposite of a Stoic. This is somebody who had absolutely no control over their emotions, and they had nothing but rage flowing out of them. Okay. Seneca, Epictetus, all thought that there was a virtue of Stoicism and that it would be sufficient to be happy. Okay. And what else do I want to say about Stoicism on this? Emperor Marcus Aurelius was also there. He was a Stoic. And eventually in 530 AD, they closed all of the pagan philosophy schools. Okay, you remember Justinian the First thought they were in contradiction to Christianity, and so he shut all these philosophy schools down. I think that was a great loss for humanity. But that gave Neo-Stoicism a birth, a syncretic philosophical movement, which kind of linked Christianity with Stoicism. And then Justus Lipsius came up with that. And then, of course, what's his name? The Thomas Aquinas, I think, and some others began to rehabilitate these guys and say that you could study Plato and Socrates and Aristotle without tarnishing your soul, because there were things, and they started by putting out these arguments that showed that these guys were aware. If you read Plato and stuff, you can see where he was aware that there was one unitary God above all the other gods, and that must have come from God himself, and therefore a value to Christians as well. Okay, so there's that. So let me see what else. I think we pass on from that. And now let me find my note, if I have it up here. Oh, my keynote on Cato. I just blew up the page. Now I can't see anything. I don't want to really just do this whole thing on. There we go. He was a Stoic. He defended the Republic, and he was always at odds with the Greek Stoicism and stuff. But there was an author. I'm looking for his name. Sallust. Yeah, Sallust. Sallust. Wrote a comparison between Cato and Caesar and their fights and their rivalries, right? And Caesar was praised for his mercy, companionship, compassion, and generosity. Cato was praised for being rigid, disciplined, and had absolute moral integrity. Okay? And let me see, where was it? He wrote a panegyric called Cato, to which Caesar never forgave him for writing, and all the obstructions that had come from it. And Caesar had written, I think it was Caesar, someone responded with the work anti-Cato, basically. I can't remember how to say all that crap in Latin now. But where is it? Virgil is somebody you probably have heard of, right? The poet Virgil, writing under Augustus, he made Cato a hero, which I don't remember when they basically stopped doing these things, but when I went to school, we still had to read Virgil's work on Cato. And I don't believe that they do those things today anymore, but if you haven't ever read any of those, then perhaps you should go back and look at that. And he did so at a time where it was unsafe to praise Cato. I mean, it was very dangerous under Caesar, under Nero, etc., just to talk about Cato, either of the Catos for that matter, but just the idea of Cato would get you in a lot of trouble. And there was a book called The Pharsalia by Lucian, I think, maybe Lucian, Lucan, and it's called Victrix Causa de Plaxut sed Victa Cantoni. And it's the conquering cause pleased the gods, but the conquered cause pleased Cato. And that was like sticking an eye into Caesar's eyes. Horace, the Tiberian, Velleius Paterculus, Velleius Maximus, Lucian, Seneca. Oh, great! Now I forgot his name. Virgil, Appian, Dio. All these guys wrote and celebrated the Catos, and it caused them some problems. Now, perhaps the most famous thing about Cato that you may have ever come in contact with would be Dante's work in the Divine Comedy, which Cato is portrayed as becoming the guardian of the Mount of Purgatory, and it's because of who and what he was. And a little excerpt here in Canto I, Dante is writing about Cato as the guardian of the Mount of Purgatory, and he says, I saw close by me a solitary old man worthy by his appearance of so much reverence that never son owed father more. Long was his beard and mixed with white hair, similar to the hairs of his head, which fell to his breast in 2 strands. The rays of the 4 holy lights so adorned his face with brightness that I saw him as if the sun had been before him. That's some high praise there. The high mount of anti-purgatory. And so anyway, there's that. He stood up against a tyrant to defend Republican government. Okay? To defend Republican government. And that's what he's known for by the founding fathers and framers. The idea that a Republican government was absolute in what needed to be done, and that it was sovereign. The people were sovereign, not the Caesars. Now, the Caesars said, hey, but we're gods, and you guys are just, here to serve us and do our will. And so that's where the clashes were, and that's where the change was. But guess who had the military? Guess who had the power? Guess who had the money? Guess who had the influence? And guess who had all the people backing it because they thought they were going to get wealthy off of this? And then they sold themselves down the river, a lot like what the Democrat Party does with freedom and liberty, because power and instant gratification and enumeration is more important to them than, in fact, doing the right thing or understanding who is sovereign and who has authority and power and what rights do government have and not. All right, where are we at? 1:11. Okay, so I got to do the math here. That gives me 11 minutes before the hour, and so that gives me 30 minutes. Okay, so Cato's Letters by Trenchard and Gordon. Okay, now we're all caught up. And there was 144 of these little puppies. They wrote it, and it was great. They really influenced the founding fathers. So here's one. This is the first letter, and it's to John Milner, Esquire, and of Great Russell Street, Bloomsbury, Gordon. Sir, and I'm going to read you the letter because I want you to hear one letter out and think about what they say and do and everything. Sir, as shy as I know you to be of public notice and eclat, let me for once draw, if not you, your name at least, from that recess which you value in proportion to the measure of felicity that you derive from it, and to your contempt for the blaze and tumult of public life, a taste to which I have the pleasure of finding my own so entirely comfortable. Quiet passions and an easy mind constitute happiness, which is never found where these are not, and must cease to be when these cease to support it. Mighty pomp and retinue, glaring equipages, and the attendance of crowds are signs, indeed burdens of greatness, rather than proofs of happiness, which I doubt is least felt where these its appearances are most seen. The principal happiness which they seem to bring is that other people think them marks of it, and very imperfect must be that happiness, which a man derives not from what he himself feels, but from what another imagines. We may indeed be happy in our own dreams, but can never be happy by the dreams of others. Happiest of all men to me seem the private man, nor can the opinion of ill-judging crowds make him less happy, because they may think others more so. He who can live alone without uneasiness, who can survey his past life with pleasure, who can look back without compunction or shame, forward without fear of rebuke. He whose every day hath produced some good, at least is passed with innocence. The silent benefactor, the ready and faithful friend. He who is filled with secret delight because he fills his heart full of benevolence, who finds pleasure in reliving and assisting. The domestic man, perhaps little talked of, perhaps less seen, beloved by his friends, trusted and esteemed by all that know him, often useful to such as know him not, enjoys such high felicity as the wealth of kingdoms and the bounty of kings cannot confer. Imaginary happiness is a poor amends for the want of real, nor can a better reason than this be urged against envying any man's grandeur and state. However mighty it be, however easy it appear, a great lot is ever accompanied with many cares, and whoever stands constantly in the eyes of the world will be apt to feel a constant concern, perhaps even to anxiety, how to become his station and degree, or how to raise it, or how to keep it from sinking. The more he is set to view, the more glaring will be any blot in his character, the more magnified. Nay, malignant eyes will be seen blots where there are none. And 'tis certain that with all his grandeur, nay, by the means and help of his grandeur, it will be always in the power of very little people to mortify him, when he can no ways in return hurt them. And thus the least man may become an overmatch for the greatest. Men are more upon a level than is generally believed, or rather the advantage is commonly where 'tis least imagined. If we take our estimate where it ought to be taken, from the state and measure of their passions, since from this source of their happiness or misery arises, greatness accompanied with vexations is worse than in humble state void of anxiety. And he who aims not at an elevated lot is happier than he who, having it, fears to lose it. Happiness is therefore from within just as much as it is a virtue, and the virtuous man enjoys the most. If with this goodness of mind he be also a wise man and a master of his passions, if to good sense he have joined other laudable accomplishments, a competent acquaintance with books, with a thorough knowledge of the world and of mankind, if he be a benevolent neighbor, a useful member of society, perfectly disinterested and justly esteemed, if he have served and saved great numbers, if he be daily protecting the innocent, daily watching and restraining the guilty, his happiness must be complete and all his reflections pleasing. Who this happy man is, where this amiable character to be found, is what I pretend not to inform you, though I am persuaded that few that know you will ask that question. My purpose here is to desire your permission to prefix your name to the following edition of Cato's letters, as well as to what I have said of Mr. Trenchard. He esteemed you as much as one man could another. You lived in a long course of intimacy with him. I have long lived to my great advantage and pleasure in an equal course of intimacy with you. You saw most of these papers before they came out, and many of them were first left to your perusal and judgment. You know in a great measure which were his, which were mine, and no man else whosoever was concerned or consulted. You know what motives produced them, how remote such motives were from views of interest, and that whilst they continued in full credit with the public, They were laid down purely because it was judged that the public, after all its terrible convulsions, was again become calm. You can vouch that, as these letters were the work of no faction or cabal, nor calculated for any lucrative or ambitious ends, or to serve the purposes of any party whatsoever, but they attacked falsehood and dishonesty in all shapes and parties, without temporizing with any, but doing justice to all, even to the weakest and most unfashionable, and maintaining the principles of liberty against the practices of most parties. So they were dropped without any sordid composition and without any consideration, save the already mentioned. They had treated of most of the subjects important to the world and meddled with public measures and public men only in great instances. You know that in the character which I have here given of Mr. Trenchard, I have seen him no higher than his own great abilities and many virtues set him. That his failings were small, his talents extraordinary, his probity equal, and that he was one of the worthiest, one of the ablest, and one of the most useful men that ever any country was blessed with. You know all the writings which he ever produced and saw most of them before they were published. You know that whatever he wrote was occasional, the effect of present thought and for immediate use, and that he never laid up writings in store, an undertaking quite opposite to his turn, and all of his acquaintances knew that he could never submit to such a task. I mention this last particular to justice to him, that he may not be answerable for any work in which he had no share, because I have been told that some who knew nothing of very little of him, perhaps never saw him, have fathered upon him his writings, which he never wrote, from no kindness to him, but purely because they were not disposed to let me be the author of a work which found such favorable reception from the world, though it was written several years after that worthy man, my friend, was dead. You, who are one of his executors, and saw all his papers, saw all his papers, know, as the other executors perfectly do, that he left no writings at all behind him, but 2 or 3 loose papers, once intended for Cato's letters, and afterwards laid aside, which papers of his, with some of mine of the same sort, you have in your hands. As you have for many years seen, now, I want to read, you should look this up. It's almost over. Let me just sum this at the end here. He says, let me add that these letters are still so well received by the public that the last edition has been long since sold off for above 3 years past. It was scarcely possible to find a set of them, unless in public auctions. I mention this that the present edition may not seem owing to the frequent quotations made from them in our late party hostilities. I flatter myself that as these papers contain truths and reason eternally interesting to human society, that they will at all times be found seasonable and useful. They have already survived all the clamor and obloquy of party, and indeed are no longer considered as party writings, but as impartial lessons of liberty and virtue. Nor would it be a small recommendation to them, to the world, if the world knew you as well as I know you, that they have ever had your approbation. I am therefore very proud upon this public occasion to declare that I have long experienced your faithful friendship, and that I am, with very great and very sincere esteem, sir, your most faithful and humble servant, T. Gordon. Now, what was that all about? That was a letter to the editor that was going to bind these books, publish them together, and repackage them. And he wanted to make sure that Gordon and Trenchard's works were identified as who wrote what. And that a lot of political enemies wanted it all to be Trenchard's and just blame Trenchard or credit Trenchard. They didn't want Gordon to get credit or anything. And he was a little worried about that. But he also wanted to explain what this was all about, that this was a book about virtue, about power, about society. and about social compacting in a way, because you can't live in society without a social compact. He wanted to make sure that factions and party were not part of this, okay? And that because people were saying that these were party attacks, these were, weapons, if you will. And I guess you can say that. But, you know, I think it was healthy that he write that. One thing I wanted also you to understand there was that was just a letter that he sat down and penned to an editor. Would you not like to be able to speak and talk like that and write like that? Well, that is some elocution. That is some writing, some diction. And we are hurting today. Because when we do stuff like this, we have to play it down. We have to dumb it down. We have to communicate at an 8th grade level or lower. It's dangerous to communicate above an 8th grade level, even in college. Unless you're in a postdoctoral study, then you're pretty much tailored at a middle school level of education. And because of that, we are having our information tailored. We're having it dumbed down. And I don't want that to sound offensive. And that hurts us. And so to read these things, to practice them, to learn them, will enable you to grasp more and to go further than your neighbor could. And so this is one of the reasons that every now and then I read these things. Now, you know of Cato. There was a quote I forgot to say earlier I meant to. Brutus was another one of the pseudonyms used for the Anti-Federalists. And there was, nisi forte non de servitut, sed de conditione serviende resuscendum est e nobis. We do not dispute about the qualifications of a master. We will have no master. Now, I don't always say that correctly, but that is my motto. I will have no master. Will you? Do you? Will you have a master? Is liberty worth more to you than your life? Today, you don't have to answer that question. I've answered it. I went into the military. I've served my country. I've been in combat. I know the answer to that question. You should probably know it for yourself. Nothing to share, just something for you to know. However, you are an American and you have a great luxury right now that you don't have to know that answer. What I'm suggesting to you, though, is that while we still can save the Constitution and our liberty, our freedom, and do so in nonviolent means, you won't have to. But if we don't do what we need to do now, and it's not fun, it's not going to be easy, it won't be painless, it won't be cheap, but it will be virtuous, it will be righteous, it will be worth it. And it will also be short of having to come up with your answer on whether your life is worth more or less than your liberty. We had founders that would shout, live free or die. Liberty or death was the password on the night that Washington led his men with their feet bandaged, the trail of blood going all the way back from home camp into Trenton, where he attacked the mercenary Hessians on Christmas Eve. Or was it New Year's Eve? I forget now. And the password for that night, the challenge, if you heard somebody, you were to say liberty. And their response was, or death. Oh, I look at you. On Periscope, I actually am looking at you. And I say, liberty. Now, what do you say back? What do you say back? I will have no masters. I'm trying to find my next note, which is, for some reason, I'm scrolling down and it's like scrolling forever slow. Oh, here we go. There we go. This was, how much time we got? 2. All right, I think I have just enough time. Or do I want to do this on the next show? I'll do it on the next show. Cato's letters were instrumental in so many things in our history. Letters from Pennsylvania Farmer. I mean, you would think of all the great deeds that our founders did, right? That's what we focus on. That's what textbooks always talk about, you know, the marches or the battles and whatnot, and they focus on that. Oh goodness, what did I just do? I just knocked the hair off of my keyboard, and I ended up moving things all over the place. So, all right, let's park that there. Excuse me. By the way, I did some periscoping this afternoon. There's 3 segments that I did that I made a Russian recipe for beef stroganoff. Ist gut beef stroganoff too, da. And so, if I recommend if you like cooking and you want to find something you can make an amazing dish that people are going to be wowed by and find out just exactly how simple and great it is and quick and easy, then go watch those 3 segments, parts 1, 2, and 3. I broke them up because I didn't want to sit there and talk for 10 minutes while things stewed or simmered. So I cut it off and went and did chores and then come back and stir it and then come back, and when it was ready, then I would kick back on. So the Andy Sue is snoring on my leg. So anyway, I thought I would pass that on to you guys if you want to go back and look. I see Smokey's already been there. So welcome, Smokey. Thanks back, and I hope you liked it. Oh boy, it was so good. My mouth is just still salivating, thinking after this I'm going to go have some more as a snack. We have Hope in the Heart. Smokey, Boyd the Alaskan, Tipinani there. We have a whole bunch of people in Periscope, and to include God's Girl and others, and we have people in the phone line and whatnot. So, all right, when I come back, I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to play to you Agadorable, our very own Agadorable's segment on the way back, and then he is going to Skype in to the show with me, and then we will discuss it for the remaining half hour-ish or so. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. I like this segment. I'm looking really forward to it because it's nice to have another great mind here, but it's also, I like speculating, and I like thinking about stuff like this. And whereas, I don't want to get the cat out of the bag. I'll save that for when we're talking. But anyway, this stuff has actually been on my mind, and so to hear what Ag has done and reconstitute, because this is actually a reconstitution of an old idea about a year or 2 ago that he did. And so anyway, I'm excited about it, and I'm going to take a quick break, rest the old pipes, and then we will come back with Agadorable. Everybody, the unscented blind guy. Be right back. Oops. Well, that didn't time out right.
man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam. It really brought him down because he couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand. Because the next day the cat went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. A toot, a toot, he rolls an eight to the bar. In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar is playing rhythm. He makes the company jump when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. He was the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. And when he played boogie woogie bugle, he was busy as a bee. And when he plays, he makes the company jump eight to the bar. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Toot 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 da da toot da toot toot. He goes it eight to the bar. He can't blow a note if the bass and guitar isn't with on. The company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. He puts the boys to sleep with boogie every night and wakes them up the same way in the early right. They clap their hands and stamp their feet because they know how he plays. When someone gives him a beat, he really breaks it up when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Company B.
Bugle Woogie Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. That was a very famous song back in World War II. Very popular song by the Andrews sisters. And it was on my name Czarinas here. Mary, those Czarinas just showed up. Hey, man. And I was thinking about that song because I just watched In the Army with, or Buck Privates rather, with Abbott and Costello. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I would play that with you. Now, without further ado, I want to play Agadorable, or as you may know him, Agador the Unpleasant Blind Guy, or sometimes referred to on this show as the Unscented Blind Guy. He has a 3-part series that we're going to do. That's about 10, 15 minutes, about 10-ish minutes long each time. Tonight's a long one. It's about 13 minutes. And I'm going to let him do the talking, listen to it. And for you on Periscope, I guess you get to stare at me listening. But, then Agador will come on and we will discuss it. And so without, I guess, any further ado, here you go, everybody.
What you are about to hear is meant to transcend time. Its purpose is to draw a line from the visionaries of today to the preservers of tomorrow to the patriots of an age yet to come. I'm Dave Milner. On September the 23rd, 2013, I released a recording I'd been wanting to make for some time. The program that was a minor reason for starting a show in the first place. 2 years from that initial podcast, the threat to individual liberty has only grown, not only in the United States of America, but around the world. This drove me to make notable updates to that original show. The audio may sound different at some points because my recording methods have changed. This is necessary because I intend to run this show once each year as long as I am able. I invite listeners to share links to the following recording with all they know who value personal liberty. Show hosts and producers have my permission to use it as long as I receive proper credit, but far more important are the suggestions and messages it holds. They make up a formula that leads humanity from totalitarian darkness, an outline for the resurgence of the individual, a plan for the way back.
Stand by for action.
Thanks for joining me. My name's Dave Miller. I am the Unfiltered Black Guy. I often do shows based on what strikes me. I might see an article, or I might hear a commentary that I think needs to be addressed, or something like that. And this show is no different. What I want to do is address how we find the way back. Now, I think it's become pretty obvious to a lot of people that the United States of America is not the same country that it was when many of us were kids. I think you can say that if you're pretty much over 40 years old. I think it can also be safely said that we have to adopt a variety of strategies and tactics for dealing with this situation so that we can return to a point where personal liberty and a government governed by the people is the norm instead of the other way around, which it is now. I take a lot of techniques and whatnot from pop culture. And some time ago, I saw our personal liberty slipping away, and it reminded me of a series of science fiction books written by Isaac Asimov, the Foundation series. The first three Foundation books, Foundation, Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation, addressed one very important thing. In these books, a galactic empire, which had represented order and peace, was breaking down through decadence, corruption, and other issues. The hero of these books believed that it would take 10,000 years before a new empire that would have real benefits for its people would rise again. So what he tried to do was to create social engineering that would guide people so that instead of 10,000 years, what he called interregnum would only last a single thousand of years. Now, I put that in terms for today because we're very close to, and in fact, I believe personally that we have tipped over the point where personal liberty is no longer a priority in government. It has switched to control. Now, I know, and I think anyone else with sense knows, that there will come a time when the people demand a return of personal liberty. They will see their government as overreaching, dictatorial, heavy-handed. It's already beginning with some, but it's going to take quite a large amount of time, in my opinion, for that to sink in and for the average man and the woman in the street to demand a return to a time when the government will actually be run by the people. Now, this could take some time. If you look at the model of the Soviet Union, what you saw was that the communist system after 1917 lasted for 70 years. And if you look at Russia today, you see that many of the same old hardliners that existed at the end of the Soviet Union are still around and still have influence. They still haven't managed to throw off many of the shackles of totalitarianism that communism has put on them. That being the case, one has to wonder how long it will take us here in the United States of America to return to a point where we demand a government that is run by the people and does not run people itself. Now, I tend to think of this time as an interregnum, as Asimov put it, and I tend to look upon conservatives and libertarians and other independent thinkers as the people who will bring the populace of the United States of America through this interregnum and into a point on the other side where the people will have the tools and the power to once again regain personal liberty. Now, 10 months ago, I wrote a piece, I guess you'd say, called American Sputnik, and it was fairly well received. If you haven't read it, you may want to do that. Now, this was inspired by something that Kurt Schlichter wrote called The Conservative Insurgency. I had these thoughts of some way to manage and preserve the correct information through the leftist interregnum into when it will be needed. But Schlichter kind of beat me to it. He beat me to it by a few days. Not being daunted, I saw one or two things that he hadn't put in and decided to put those in myself. Reiterated a few things that he said and came up with something pretty good. So if anyone hasn't read that, you may want to read The Conservative Insurgency by Kurt Schlichter and American Sputnik by me. I'm going to put both of those in UBG Contact on the Twitter. Now, I felt, given the current commentary going on in the conservative community, that it was a good time to revisit American Sputnik and to add a few things to it. Now, I'm not going to read you the entire thing. What I am going to do is give you kind of the general sense of it, and I'm going to expand on it with new thoughts that I've had. And looking at the first paragraph, I see that, yes, the basic premise that I wrote down is still true. The leftists have only gotten stronger in media and pop culture, and conservatives are not going to be able to compete with them in that arena with the same strength. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't compete with them, or that we shouldn't try to compete with them. Not at all. It is saying, however, that we're not as strong as they are. Now, there are some people who are going to look at my whole viewpoint and say that it's defeatist, and that all we need to do is hunker down and work a little harder, and we can win through this thing, and it's all going to be all right. And listen, I'm not saying that people shouldn't try to deal with things as they exist now. I've never served in the military, but I do understand the difference, in this sense at least, between strategy and tactics. In this sense, tactics is how do we deal with something that's here. Strategy is how can we plan for what's coming. And what I'm talking about doing with American Sputnik and what Kurt Schlichter was talking about doing with the conservative insurgency is strategy. It is dealing with the future. And that's not to say that we can't move on all levels to try and restore personal liberty. Anything that we can do that's nonviolent and productive to further the cause of personal liberty and to keep it in the minds of the people is a good thing. No one says that we just have to hold with one technique or one strategy. There are more conservatives than you think, and we can all do different things. We're all good at different things. And this is our strength, I feel. So we all should do these different things. Basically, it's about find what you can do and do it. You don't have to do everything. I know there are some people who say you have to do it all or you have to at least try to do it all. I say do what you can. Do what you're comfortable with in your abilities, and if you have to leave your comfort zone because you feel that it's important to further the cause, that's even better, okay? But do what you can. And what I and others can do on one front for the personal liberty of people is to talk about strategies moving forward into what I believe is going to be the next century. This leftist dark age is going to take an awful long time, folks. I do not expect to be alive to see the other end of this. It would be nice if I could be, but I don't think I will be. So what I'm going to do is try and lay out some strategies that people can use in the years moving forward. Because if this doesn't stop with us, it can at least start with us. And that's what I talked about in American Sputnik. Now, Americans don't like to wait. We've been raised in a give-it-to-me-now culture for the most part. And most of us are impatient. We don't like starting from the start. Baby steps are something we hate, or as Richard Marcinko put it in some of his books, I hate bleeping square one. But that's where we are, and that's what we have to deal with, and that's what we will deal with. Now, as I pointed out in American Sputnik, what we have to do begins with the education of our kids from K through 12 and beyond. What the left wants to do is summed up in Common Core. And Michelle Obama rather chillingly said that we have to change our traditions and we have to change our history. And let me be clear about this, folks. They mean exactly that. You don't believe me? There was a recent story about a textbook being used in Denton, Texas. That's a suburb of Dallas. Denton is, by the way. That supposedly points out supposedly teaches the history of the United States. And in that, it has its version of our Constitution. And in its version of our Constitution, The Second Amendment, as far as this book is concerned, says that people have the right to bear arms as long as they're in a state militia. This is absolutely not what the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States says, but this is what's being taught in our schools. So we have to educate the young ourselves. We have to basically deprogram them, because Common Core is going to be the new norm in most schools. If we can get our kids out of public schools and homeschool them, so much the better. If we can get them into private schools that have curricula that we approve of, so much the better. But the alternatives for educating our kids are going to grow fewer and fewer as the left slowly tightens its grip on our educational system. They will make sure that no one can get any kind of official certification who hasn't gone through their program. So, what do? In Part 2, you'll hear concrete strategies and tactics that you can use in the struggle for individual liberty. That's it for this time. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye. The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2015, Anno Domini.
Anno Domini, which is Latin for more Domino's pizza, please. All right. Let's see if anybody's still here. That was, hey, Athena, come on. Don't be a critic. I know. That was Agador, the unscented blind guy, or as we like to call him, Agadorable. And I think he should be able to talk to you now on the air.
Hello, Prof.
Hello,
Prof. How do you read?
Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm going to have to kick these dogs out so I can hear you. Okay, come on, everybody, let's go. Out. Come on, baby, out. Go.
Well, that's not going to do me very much good in the dog community.
All the clicking on my hardwood floor with their nails is just so loud I can't hear anything. So, all right. Well, I'll let you take points since this is your work.
All right. Well, I had done this, as I said in there, 2 years ago, and from then to now, I've gotten a few new listeners thanks to Mary, and thanks to Dan Butcher of the Pundit Press. So I wanted more people to hear this again, and there were some things that I said in the original show that it have bugged me over the past couple of years. There's some things I wanted to include and things like that. So and of course, watching the current situation, which is even worse now than it was 2 years ago, I decided, okay, I'm going to have to run this thing every year as long as I'm able, until I get shut down. And that's the reason for doing this again. And I think it's also good for people who have heard it before to kind of contemplate it and think about it, because a lot of things happen in the course of a year, and a lot of things are presented to us if we're politically aware, and they're right there in our face, and we may not think about these other things. So it's nice to have a reminder. And I want to say, Prof, I appreciate what you had to say at the start of your show. Everybody, including me, talks about the problem all the time, ad nauseum. But there aren't a whole lot of solutions out there. And I'll tell you, I think that eventually, things are going to lead to revolution. In fact, I think there'll probably be several. And I figured that out a long time ago. But what wasn't out there that I could see was how, what we do on the other end, or rather what our descendants do on the other end. I mean, are you going to have, after everybody gets lined up against the wall and taken out, are you going to have a reign of terror? I mean, is it going to be like like the end of the First French Revolution. And I think that the thing that we least need is another Robespierre of the future. So if there are enough people that have the information that they need on hand to present to the people and say, listen, this is how these people came to a point where they set up a government that put power in the hands of the people and not in the hands of a privileged few. Those future people that will set up the new republic or whatever form of government they set up will be able to look at that and have the benefit of that past knowledge. And that's really where my head is at with all of this. Your response?
Yes. I've often thought about this, and I wonder what would happen. And that would be that most of this country would be, if it fails, it's going to get broken up. And places like Alaska will become a republic and wall itself off from the country, and Hawaii will just become Hawaii, a little island in the middle of nowhere. But Texas, I think, would re-republicize itself. And that most of California all the way up through New Mexico would just be swamped into Mexico again. And then the rest of the country would be broken up into oligarchies, fiefdoms, people with power that can get people to join their cause, and it'd be like a medieval fiefdom again, where you have little liege lords and power, dukes and whatnot, and so I'm glad I'm in Texas, because I think this would be where the bright light would be. The shining state on the hill would be Texas at this point. But I could be wrong. We have our fair share of corrupt people too. But there's that nebulous that we are a republic already, and I think maybe that kernel could grow. And that's why I've set up all these books in the library and teaching my children not just what I want them to believe, but why they should believe it, in hopes that they'll do the same with their kids. And I plan to do that to my grandkids as well, and if I live long enough anyway. And the purpose behind that is to make sure there's a seed, so that if anything ever happens, that the people in my family realize that their job is to serve their fellow men, and to do so through Christ, and that's how they'll achieve greatness, as by being the least amongst, by serving Christ, and through him serving all people and preserving these ideas. And so I want them to be able to be the ones who can hunker down and secretly teach about freedom, like the early Christians had to, while they were being persecuted, and while the British were persecuting what we now call the founders, as they were hunting them down and attacking them and killing them, preachers, politicians, laity, people just out working on their farms, and so I hope to keep those thoughts alive. And this is why I primarily do my job, is I'm laying the groundwork, the seeds, the thirst for the knowledge, and then the knowledge. I don't know if I'm doing any good, but this is what I think I'm doing anyway. Those pictures you see, what my friends think I'm doing, what I actually do, and what I think I'm doing.
Oh yeah.
So, but I think it's integral that we have an idea of how to preserve our knowledge and pass it on, so that it's not lost, because none of the ideas of the founding fathers were original. What's unique is that they put it all together and they created something from it. And there's nowhere else on the face of this planet that it's like this. Not even England is like this. Now they're close. Australia's close, Canada's close, but none of them have what we have, or what we're supposed to have. This is probably a better way of saying that. And because of that, I think I can't think of anything more important than to make sure that there's some mechanism that follows us that would preserve this knowledge. I guess it almost seems like we're talking about a science fiction fantasy book, where somebody uncovers a group of books that have been preserved, and they start reading letters to the Pennsylvania farmer and Cato's letters and stuff, and they start getting these ideas, and so then
that was a great segue, by the way. I love that. Cato wanting to preserve the basic philosophies and ways of Rome through Stoicism. Stoicism, not socialism. That was a great segue into the beginning of it. And if you think about it, Prof, throughout history, you've had people that didn't want knowledge of the forebears kept. I mean, you had Stalin who destroyed history. You had in China, you had emperors that destroyed Chinese history of China before them. And of course, now you've got the Muslims that have wiped everything out that is not Islamic that happened before the 6th century. Just everything, including ancient temples and stuff like that. And, it's that particularly, to my mind, is a crime against humanity because it's destroying our past. And I see no reason why future tyrants would not want to do the exact same thing, especially to something like those letters, especially to something like, say the Magna Carta, or the rights of Englishmen, or the Articles of Confederation that could threaten what they have going at this future time. They would find those ideas to be a complete threat. So, and that is why even now, Prof, you see our history distorted. They don't teach about the world wars anymore, and they distort amendments of the Constitution. I mean, we're not at a point yet where copies of the Declaration of Independence are proscribed. But we've reached a point now where it's very possible that could happen, and maybe even in our lifetime.
Well, there's you can look back at history and see the Hitlers and Stalins and Chairman Childs and stuff that suppressed history, and the kings of England did it, like the Magna Carta. They tried to get rid of that after it happened.
Right.
And you understand why, but you can see it right here, right now, today, with the Democrat Party trying to change history on its role in suppressing black people and enslaving them. And now they're rewriting that history, and they're rewriting the Holocaust of World War II. And they're banning things like flags, American flags being worn on your shirt, and the 10 Commandments in schools. And they're doing these things not because they're crazy, but because it's preparation to ban other things that they want. And once they get you used to them being able to get rid of concepts and ideas, this is very Orwellian. And if you mention it, then people dismiss it as being, well, that's just a science fiction book. You're just crazy. Yeah. But this is exactly what's being done. Newspeak is very real and prevalent in our society today. And they are attempting to rewrite our history. And when you say that, an average American should probably be dismissive of that. Say, what are you talking about? Of course they're not rewriting history. History's history, right? Well, not so much. Not when you get history from books, and the books are written by professors, and most of the professors, 90% of them or better, are progressives. 5% are unidentified, and maybe 1% are conservative. They're the ones writing history. They're the ones teaching it. And our students don't know better. And it's gotten to be now that it's generational. And this is something I pointed out, that there are many teachers today, and I blame the teachers' unions and teachers for this lack of information American students have. But the sad part is, and the reality is, that most of these teachers don't even know what they're teaching is wrong, or that they're teaching an agenda. And so because they don't know it, they don't know they need to go out and research and learn more. They think they have done research. They think they have learned these topics, and they think they're doing a service to their students instead of a disservice to their student, a disservice to this country, and a disservice to every man and woman who've ever fought for it.
Well, and remember what Queen Elizabeth I said to Mary Queen of Scots, or is supposed to have said. History is written by the winners.
Oh, I think you meant it's going to hurt. Old joke.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's going to hurt.
Yep, that's going to leave a mark. It is.
Yeah. Well, that's right. But history is written by the winners, and I mean, for instance, I've said this on my show a few times, and that is that when we look at the Revolutionary War, I'm not a Pollyanna. I don't look at this from the perspective of America was perfect and great. And I've done a lot of shows where I've exposed the problems and corruptions on our end during this, and the mistakes we made, and the reasonable efforts that were made on the behalf of on the part of the British and stuff that have been overinterpreted or misinterpreted. And so in my world, it's better to know the truth than to learn a lie. But when you have an agenda that's not the truth, then that almost becomes a superfluous and dangerous concept to entertain, because you need people to buy into things. And this is what Cloward and Piven and Saul Alinsky are all about. And if you look at things that are being done by our government, especially by the administration and then the left of the Democrats, you see this alignment with falsities and reappropriations of history and the repackaging of evil, to the point where now people would tell you, I have students that have actually told me Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat and he freed the slaves because of the repressiveness of the Republican Party and the NRA. And, when you can get to that level of disambiguation, then we're in trouble. Especially since these generations don't know. And so we've got to do something long term. We've got to be ready. Right now, what are we doing? Well, we've got tea parties. That's the tactics side. We're protesting. We've got tea parties. We're trying to get people elected. We're trying to educate. We're trying to people get awake and aware. But the strategery, we have to have a strategery, and that strategery has got to be that we begin to knuckle down as conservatives and go into fields that we aren't traditionally in, like education. And we need to get in there and become teachers and teach correct history, not our agenda, not conservative history and not progressive or liberal, but true history. We need to teach our children how to think, because that's even more important than teaching them what to think. And we need to get in other fields too, like the news business and Hollywood, etc., and fight the culture war. But long-term wise, I think that is a sound strategy. And if we fail, then we need a plan B. And that is to, I don't know. Those movies like The Scorpion, where they have a secret society that's there protecting the lance of Christ or something. And they spent generation after generation as a secret society. Well, maybe we need to create a new secret society called the Republicans. And they're here to preserve the Republic and the idea of it and what freedom and liberty really are. And then, we'll give them some handshakes and rings and crap and then start them on a path where, 3 or 4 generations from now, they'll be able to come back together and reinstitute it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take things like that, and it's going to take other things. I would suggest that if you start something like that, that be the public face, because that's what a future government will go after first. And I do cover some of this in the subsequent 2 parts. of this thing. I do cover some of that, but yeah, there will have to be a public face for the opposition to try and squash, and then there will have to be those quietly in the background. And I want to clear up something that's been said about the Way Back, about the whole show, and that it's been said to me directly by people that, well, all you want to do is bury our history in the ground and dig it up later on. And I was like, no, yes, I want it to be preserved, but I also want it to be taught at the same time. Do both things, not just one. And the teaching is even more important, because, again, I'm into science fiction, and I remember the end of Fahrenheit 451. That's by Ray Bradbury, by the way, if anybody wants to go back and read that book. It's a fantastic book. And it may come down to that. You may have one person who has memorized the Articles of Confederation. You may have another person who's memorized, the writings of John Locke. You may have one that's memorized, the writings of William O. Douglas. And at the proper time, they can pass that on. There are a lot of ways to teach, and as long as we keep generations, a few, out there that know the truth and keep the truth, then at the other end, we're going to be all right. And that's going to be the deal. We have no idea when the other end is going to be, and there will be revolutionaries who are going to be working along parallel lines. But we really don't even have to associate with them if we don't want to. And again, I'm not saying that. I'm going to echo you here. I'm not saying that people shouldn't, buy guns and store food, or store food and buy guns, as Wolfowitz says. But I am saying that this is another way. This is being, as you said, idea preppers. And it is long after I'm dead and gone and forgotten, I want to know that people have taken up this idea and are implementing it. That's what it's about.
Well, you mentioned that we're teaching now, and the reason we can is probably just a couple of very small reasons. One, the material exists and we're aware of it, and we have a government that allows us to do it. Now, if in the future we have a government that does not allow us to do it, it has to be done in secret. But it can't be done in secret if the material does not exist. Now, in England, there were very big subversive people called Protestants, and they were printing stuff that went against what the crown wanted, that went against the Holy Roman Catholic Church, and they were printing this stuff, and they were considered heretics and dangerous to the crown, dangerous to national security, etc. And they would meet in private, these Lutherites and whatnot, Browns and stuff, and they would meet and teach from their heretical Bible. Now, the reason they were able to do so was because the materials existed. And in spite of a government clampdown, it still occurred. And the early Christians did exactly the same thing with the Roman clampdown on their religion. And so this is why I hope it will happen. So what you and I have to do is figure out a way, or what we, not just you and Agador and myself, but the rest of us have to figure out is a way that we can ensure that the nucleus will be there in the future in such a way that the government can't ban and prevent it, I think that the more technical we get, the easier it might be to have this information out there where it's so ubiquitous that there's no way for them to get rid of it. But then again, the more technical you get, the opposite could be true. The easier it is for them to get rid of everything technical. And if we have a fallen government, what's to say that an EMP doesn't rip through and destroy everything through an electrical magnetic pulse, and just shut down all computers so that there isn't any more electronic versions of constitutions, declarations, letters from Pennsylvania farmers, etc.
Yes. Well, Prop, I mean, even, as far as that goes, you don't even have to wear a tinfoil hat like me and think that a future repressive government might do that. The proper size solar flare could do that.
Right. Yeah. Or, I also have enough hard time keeping my stuff working, period. But things happen. But
they do.
There's got to be alternatives. And people have to know what's true, too, to preserve. I mean, what should we choose to preserve? What documents need to be protected? And that's something in Fahrenheit, is that people had to self-select what great work they were going to become,
right?
What canvas they wanted to be, and and I remember when I read that, I had a great memory, and now thinking on that and thinking on what I thought as a kid when I read that, that'd be no problem memorizing a book, and but today I can barely remember what I had for lunch. Anybody's name or what's going on, so I would not be able to benefit society like that. Of course, I've got this ginormous brain with a lot of stuff in it already.
Yeah.
But
well, and
yes,
plus there are a lot more things now going on to distract us. Certainly more things going on that would have went on at the start of our republic. I mean, you were speaking of Noel Webster, and what he did in his spare time, which was just read, and that's because there was no television, no internet, no anything else. I mean, back in those days, if you wanted diversion and distraction, well, sure, you could go down to a tavern and listen to a troubadour or whatever talk was going on there, or you might attend a live performance, but it wasn't in your face 24/7 like it is now. So there is that.
Yes. Well, if the world falls apart, I imagine that there's going to be a lot less entertainment. People will go back to reading and talking and communicating. But instead of counting up friends on Facebook, they'll actually have real friends.
Yeah.
But, T. Pinani says we should have a secret server on a non-network hidden in a secret bunker. So we already have that. But, it's called the Hermitage.
Well, Hillary Clinton stole it, though. That's the problem.
Studies. What's that?
I said, well, we already had that, but Hillary Clinton stole it.
Yes.
No,
took my server.
an idea that occurs to me that I didn't even put in the show, is that I was talking about going down to the tavern and listening to the troubadours. That might be another way to pass the information down through teaching songs, because as people learn very well. Some people learn very well through song, and that may be one way. Again, it's all about what people can do. I mean, if somebody can play, as an old grandpa's acoustic guitar, and they have the ability to write a song, and they can sing, in some good fashion, then hey, that may be a way to pass some of that knowledge down. Everything is on the table, Prof, is what I'm saying, as far as preservation and teaching goes. Everything that doesn't do physical harm to people is on the table. You know what I mean?
I do. I think to cut off any one avenue is to spite our face. That we need every avenue that we can come up with, in hopes that some of them survive. So I feel that there's very little things, very few things should be rejected. Just say, okay, this is what you think, pass it on, pick it up. This is this is now your task, and we'll move to this, and we'll get other people to do that, and so people should adopt their passions And we need to do things right now. We need to teach our children these things, our grandkids, our neighbors. You know, when I had some boys coming over to work in my yard, I used to give them $6 an hour, and I'd sit out there and talk to them about capitalism all day while we were working. They were amazed. They said they've never heard this stuff in school or in their homes. You know, and so now they had these. Sadly, they decided they could make better money and be better capitalists elsewhere than working in my yard. So I defeated myself, but I helped them. We've got 2.5 minutes, Ag. Say something, and then I'm going to close it up, and we will do this again next Sunday. But you know what? Let's just do it the last hour, because this isn't enough time.
Okay, Prof. We'll do that, and yeah, it works for me, and we'll do it exactly this way. And all I have to say at the end here is y'all can say an extra prayer for Jeff Mitchell. He's going in for a heart procedure tomorrow, and if you'll remember him in your prayers, that would be very much appreciated. And Professor, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it very much, and I will see all of you guys next week. God love, and bye-bye.
Bye, Ag. That was Agador, the Unscented Blind Guy, everybody, and we will do this for an hour next Sunday and do a better job of that, because this is too quick. And Jeff Mitchell, yes, he's a good mate, good friend, and I like him dearly. He's over in England and lives in London, I believe, near Felixstowe, and he is part of the English Defense League, and he is a true warrior against the Islamization of this world. So hearts and prayers out for his heart surgery. He's been ill for quite a long time, and this is a big deal. So, all right. We love you, Jeff, in our prayers, and Godspeed. And Dominate Spiritus Sanctus, my good friend. Okay, so there's that, and I will see everybody on tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central Texas time, and we'll pick up a little more on the Cato letters, and so I guess that's that. So Monday and Tuesday, Cato letters, 7 p.m. Central Texas. I will see everybody then. Thank you for coming and playing the home version of this show. And via Contoodles, mi amigos, and for you Agadorables out there, via Con Carne.